radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right, welcome. How you doing? Fade to Black. Yeah, today is Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday, August 19th, 2025. Let's do this, man. Yeah, I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What an amazing week here on Fade to Black. And yeah, I mean, nearly perfect. Last night, Suzanne Ross was with us, Souls in Simulation. Great conversation. Tonight, Riz Virk, Living in a Simulation. Tomorrow night, Dahlia Burgoyne joins us. We're going to be talking about Mindsight Without Eyes. All of that tomorrow night. She is absolutely amazing. And then Thursday night, Trevor Grassi finally is here. The two of us have been trying to put a show together for a very long time. He's like, Jimmy, when I'm ready, when it's ready, but we're doing it this Thursday. We're going to talk about his team, the SARS project, the SARS scans, and what is going on underneath Giza. Huge show on Thursday night, huge show tomorrow night, huge show tonight, huge show last night. Absolutely great week here on Fade to Black. All right, I have 5 major events coming up. Actually, it is 6. Yeah, it's been changed to 6. All in 2026. I am focusing on Beyond Belief for the rest of this year till I get my feet underneath me. So, but for 2026, first up is the Conscious Life Expo, which is February 20th through the 23rd at the LAX Hilton. Right after that, the Contact Modalities Expo, May 1st through the 3rd, 2026 in Delavan, Wisconsin at the resort at Delavan Lake. After that, Contact in the Desert, May 28th through June 1st, 2026. Tickets available this Thanksgiving Day. After that, I head over to the UK for the Monty Python Tour of Scotland, August 1st through the 9th, 2026. And then after that, or maybe it's right before that, I'm going back to Peru for the Inca celebration of the sun, the winter solstice. And that is in May through June 1st. Okay. And that tour is now posted at the Hidden Inca Tours website. All right. So that is there. And then I go to Scotland. Then I come back from Scotland and I go back to Peru. And this time to Easter Island with Brian Forster. And this is November 2026. I checked the website today. It's still not up there, but it is November of 2026. So they just don't have it posted yet. But they do have the summer solstice in May through June 1st. So that is up there. All right. All right. So everything that I am doing, you can just click on the links below for tickets and information. I was just reading the chat before, not that this is a big deal, but it was just funny to me. Just reading the chat as the show intro was starting. And did Jimmy stop sending emails about the shows? I was like, I don't send emails. I've never sent an email about the show. In fact, I don't do any of the marketing. I don't do any of that stuff. There is no email list. We don't do anything like that. And the Fade to Black team here does all of the social media posts, and they handle all of that. I don't see it. The artwork is prepped by, it's I don't see anything. It just goes out, and I take it for granted that it is out there. But that is what is done. We don't do any emailing at all. Okay. That is something that I just don't, I don't appreciate. This is just me. And I know that a lot of people market and use email to market with. That's fine. But I don't open up emails that I'm not expecting. All right. Pretty much. That's it. I have somebody else that goes through my emails for me. There's just way too much of that stuff that goes on. Sending out emails, me personally, just to people that I'm sending emails to directly. That's rare. That is rare. Why? Because I'm living in a simulation. And in my simulation, man, the less work, the better in my world. I had said many times over the last couple of weeks that if you ever get a chance, if the opportunity is in front of you and you have a chance to sit down and have a conversation with Riz Virk, do it. Do it. I get to do it all the time and it's fun. And a couple of weeks ago, Riz and I sat outside and on this patio with a group of friends, and we just sat and talked all night. And I'm sitting there enjoying the conversation so much. It's like, how is it that I'm able to sit with Riz, a person of his caliber, of his integrity and his knowledge, and just sit and shoot the shit like this and get inside of his head? It's absolutely amazing. And I took that thought with me, and I've said it so many times. And if you ever get the chance to sit down with Riz, do it. Buy him some food, offer just sit down and, hey man, I'll take care of everything. Is it okay if I just sit right here and see if you can make that happen? Because it's absolutely incredible. Tonight, Riz Virk is back with us. We're going to be talking about what everybody is talking about right now. Are we living in a simulation? He's written not only written about it, but he has lectured about it. He has toured the world about this, conferences, television, and everything else. And he just did an incredible sit down with Avi Loeb, and we'll touch upon that too as well, and how that went down. That's pretty cool. So, but he's back. And we're going to tackle all of these ideas about our universe. And is it in a computer simulation? Is it just our planet? Is it everything? How it relates to everything else? We have quantum physics and we have consciousness to throw into the mix. I asked Riz, and we talked a lot about free will a couple of weeks ago and the future of humanity. We discussed all of those things one-on-one. So maybe we'll replicate some of that private conversation tonight on the show, because he's very successful in business. He's an investor. He's a futurist. Of course, he's a best-selling author. He's a video game industry pioneer, and of course, a Hollywood film producer. He has a BS in computer science from MIT, an MS in management from Stanford's GSB. He is currently working on a PhD. I think right now he's teaching at ASU. We'll get a update on all of that right now with the one and only Riz Virk. He's right there. What's going on, man?
Hi, Jimmy. Good to be with you again on what did you call it? Bespoke radio for the masses. Is that what it says in your intro? Yeah.
So now you're going to be out in public, and there's going to be a line at your table. Jimmy says to come up and buy you some jalapeno poppers, and we can sit and have a conversation. So get ready for that.
Sounds good. There we go. Well, it was great at the Psy Games. That was great.
Yeah,
we got to spend some time outside and chat. I know we were all so busy during the day, but it was nice to do it in the evening.
Man, we rocked that. We were out there for hours, man.
You were out later than me, man. You're like an all-night party.
I think we wrapped it up at about the same time. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. And one of the things that I said that night, Riz, and I just want your opinion on this. I want the academic world is one thing, and hanging out and exchanging ideas and your friends and you know, people that are around you and contributors and teachers and so forth. There's that world and the conversations that go on there. And those types of conferences, which I can only imagine are a little more uptight. But I asked you, I said, Riz, and that, okay, Riz, what? I said, Riz Be straight with me right now. Remember when I asked you the question and I said, just be straight. So I'm going to say it to you right now. Be straight. What's it like to have our community just embrace you with open arms and welcome you to the family? How cool is this community?
I'd say it's pretty cool. And if you remember, I think your question was, do I prefer to hang out, with a bunch of academic types, or do I prefer to hang out with like this community? and my answer was,
I said, don't bullshit me, and so.
Yeah. And my answer was, this community is much more fun, right? Because we get into much more interesting conversations. That said, there are groups of people that overlap that are also part of the academic community that are interested in UFOs. And that's always fun too, is when you get sort of people that have been in both worlds, because they can't usually talk about this stuff during their daily jobs anyway,
Can we share, let's share a private moment that happened at the conference. We're not going to name names. Okay. So
Yep.
Who we're talking about right now doesn't have to sweat. All right. So we're not going to do that. But Riz and I, again, we had another private moment, and we were sitting on a couch. This was the day before we were out on the patio. But anyway, so Riz and I are sitting on this couch, and how's it going? It's going good. How about you? We finally had a chance to just like get off our feet, right? All right, so we're sitting there. It was a long day, right? And so we're sitting there, and this guy steps up, and he says, and Riz goes, "Oh, Jimmy, this is my friend. He's an astrophysicist at blah 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 university. I don't want to give anything away." And I said, "Oh, really? Okay." And Riz introduces me to him. And I go, so I would, he goes, not going to talk about it. I go, you don't even know what I was going to ask. No.
He said this, not me. Yeah.
Yeah, he said this. And I was like, yeah, but, and his answer was, and Riz backed me up on this. He said, I'm going to paraphrase, but this is nearly a direct quote. He goes, I'm on a career path. I love my job and I love my funding. And I'm not going to screw any of that up by talking to you. I was like, man,
about UFOs, strong. Right?
Yeah. And I was like, wow. And then what happened? Another physicist walks up, and Riz introduces me to him. And that physicist turns to me and he goes, man, I'm your biggest fan. I love your show. Listen to it all the time. I said, tell this guy that I'm cool. And then he goes, I didn't say you weren't cool. And but that is the attitude, though, isn't it? In academia, the funding environment, the career path, and this is stuff that is on the minds of many in the academic world, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I even had, so as you mentioned, I'm back in academia now. I'm at Arizona State University, and I actually have finished my PhD. So technically, I can be called doctor now, which is great. But I haven't gotten the actual diploma, but it's pretty much done when when you've defended the dissertation and, your advisors have signed off on all of that. But I ran a small UFO discussion group at ASU. And it was mostly with faculty, and the faculty were like, I can't talk about this during my day job. These are faculty that were interested in the topic. Either they knew somebody who had seen something, or in some cases they had seen something themselves. Some of them were really well-versed. Others were just kind of curious about it. But they were just so happy to have a group within the academic community that they could talk about it. And so even with these professors that you mentioned, it's at conferences like this, there's an overlap between folks from that world and kind of this world. And it's nice that they can get together. We can get together and talk about it. I mean, we have a kind of it's not really secret, but let's just say it's not a well-known discussion group that we do online with a bunch of individuals. We call it the Dagobah group, which is named after the planet in Empire Strikes Back, because one of the things that people wanted to investigate was spoon bending, right? And I recommended they go to spoon bending party, and then we got this group together of academics to talk about what is this possible? Does this happen? Is it fake? and a couple of physicists went out. So I have a friend named Zenka Caro in Sedona. She runs these monthly.
She's amazing.
You know Zenka?
She's cool.
Yeah, she's amazing. Yeah, and she runs these monthly PK parties for psychokinesis. It's spoon bending parties. In fact, before we end here, maybe I'll grab a spoon so you can see what I did. But I just encourage them to go do it. And there was a story. There was a guy named Jack Houck, Houck, who was an aerospace engineer who started these PK parties back in the 80s. And he went around and got people started to, try to bend spoons and do other things. And he went to Los Alamos. And he said, you normally need about 15 people to make, this spoon bending process easier. And there's a moment when the spoon ends up being flexible enough. And I've seen these little 11-year-old girls, do multiple loops in a spoon, and I was like, can I see the spoon, and try to unbend it? I couldn't. But so this guy went to Los Alamos with a bunch of physicists and their wives, and all the wives could bend the spoon, but the physicists couldn't. And that says something about the academic environment that they're in. And it turns out
proof that we are in a simulation is what that is.
It probably is. And it turns out the physicists individually, say with their wives in a group, could do it. But if they're in a group with other physicists, it was like there's this weird groupthink that goes on about what is acceptable and what's not. And I did an academic research project a few years ago. I haven't published my results, but I have talked about it, where I interviewed like 20 professors who are now investigating UFOs or who have in the past. Some of them openly, like you would know the names, like Avi Loeb, Gary Nolan, Kevin Knuth, and some who are not so open about their interest. And what I found was, all of them said there's a stigma within this environment. And this was 22, 23, 24. So it was after the New York Times article. It was more recent than that. And so I asked them all, when did you start doing this openly? And they said, well, they waited till they had a job, and then they waited till they got tenure, and then they waited till they became full professors, which happens after tenure. So you're talking like 10 plus years, because at that point they're pretty secure. And I said, well, did anyone ever say to you, don't study UFOs? And the answer was no. Nobody ever said it, but it was like you were part of this group in like high school or something, where the group would make fun of people that believed in other things, like whatever, psychokinesis, telepathy, Bigfoot, UFO, ghost. Like we made fun of those people. And so we're not those people. So it was a socialization that happens over many years. But I'm happy to report that there's less stigma now than there was even a few years ago, because of all of these things with the congressional legislation, the New York Times, et cetera. But it's still there. And so it's interesting to me that there's like this kind of a group morphic field. It's like a simulation within a simulation, if you will. Right.
You just did. I just wanted to mention really quick, and I'll mention it later on in the show, but Riz is going to be with us in San Diego on September 27th. And so we put up the links for that last night, and there's a promo code for that, Jimmy 10. And but I'm going to be there. I'm going to host the dinner cruise. I'm going to host the dinner cruise. And, so
Suzanne will be there, right? Who was there last night? And Dahlia will be there too, right? She's
Dahlia
on tomorrow.
Sarah Breskman Cosme is going to be there. Daryl Anka. Yeah, she's got a pretty. She doesn't play around. Suzanne doesn't play around. She really puts on world-class events. But Riz is going to be there. So if you want to have a conversation with Riz, just come and find me. Yeah, we'll do it on the dinner cruise. You just had a fireside chat with Avi Loeb. Yes. And I wanted to ask you, he just wrote in his blog over the weekend, he's been lighting the fires with this 3-eye atlas. Just incredible things to say. Now, but he said in his blog over the weekend that it appears to be, with the data collected, self-illuminated. Okay. It's not being lit up by the sun, and that the illumination internally may be because it's nuclear powered, and we're seeing its heat signature and how it is illuminated internally. And then he said that there is a light in front of it that is illuminated. And he says that the dust that may be coming off of this object is accumulated from its interstellar travels, and that it is coming off of the craft. Right? And talk about academia stepping, off of the freeway. Avi's saying now. He also said that NASA has agreed for a massive amount of data collection when it comes around the sun on October 29th, which will be its closest flyby Mars. It's like it'll be really close to Mars, and that'll be the best opportunity at that point for data collection. And he says NASA has agreed to do that. What do you make of all of this stuff? Not only that Avi is saying, but holy crap, could this be an alien spacecraft?
Well, so, I did sit down with Avi just a couple of weeks ago. I was in Boston. In fact, I launched a new edition of the simulation hypothesis. And so we did an event at the Harvard Club about the book launch. And so let me just mention it's out now. It's got about 100 new pages since the last edition. And also AI has made a lot of progress. And so that was mostly what we talked about. And with Avi arguing with me about whether we're in a simulation or not, with him thinking where everything is real. And I thought it was interesting because he was pushing back on the simulation idea in the same way that I think his colleagues push back on him when he talks about this could be an extraterrestrial interstellar craft. And so I thought it was an interesting, kind of turn of events, right? Where he was playing the more conservative role. Whereas usually, Avi goes out on a limb within academia and people, they tend to call him all kinds of names within academia. But getting back to what we were talking about earlier, I mean, he was chairman of the astrophysics department at Harvard. So
and the Black Hole Institute.
And he also started that. Yeah, the Black Hole Institute. So he has enough credentials where it doesn't matter, And as an aside, I was there at the Galileo Project conference with him a couple of years ago. Maybe it was last year, I think, or whatever the last one was. And I ran into somebody I knew from Boston who also works in the Institute for Astrophysics, or the Center for Astrophysics there, that where the Galileo Project is located. And I said, well, what do you guys think of Avi? And he's off talking about UFOs and stuff. And this guy, was an academic, and he goes, well, we all think he's kind of eccentric, but, we all know he's a bit of reputation, but he's done a lot of interesting things. So we just kind of let him do his thing off to the side, as long as he raises money from outside and he's not taking away our money from government grants and stuff, which of course has meant people like Gary Nolan and Avi Loeb have had to raise money from private sources for these types of things, as opposed to getting money from government grants. And they were saying, they're building $100 million telescope. So the Galileo project is relatively small in comparison to that. So I asked him during that event 2 weeks ago, what about this? And mostly he was asking me questions about the book, but then at the end I said, well, okay, before we turn to the audience, let's get your take on this interstellar object. And at the time, I mean, he did say there were various anomalies about the orbit, et cetera, but, he said most likely it's still a comet, most likely, or a natural occurring asteroid at the time. So it's interesting to me that within the last few weeks, I guess, he's kind of ramped up his questions about the uncertainty of this with his Loeb scale, I guess he calls it now, which is...
Yeah. I mean, he's pointed out a few interesting things. Yeah. First off, he is data driven. He's not talking about reptilians. He's not talking about mantid beings or Nordics or little grays. He
won't go there. Trust me.
He has zero.
Anything consciousness too. Because I was saying there might be things outside the simulation. He was like, nope, I only deal with what's real and can be measured.
Data driven, right? Okay. Yeah. So, and in his book, Extraterrestrial, I mean, that's a data-driven book, and he points out a lot of things about Oumuamua that are very, very compelling. Hundreds of things, not a few things, hundreds of
one of the things that I had emailed him about during that time in Oumuamua was that if you look at the estimated size of Oumuamua and the shape, it was almost exactly the size in that science fiction novel by Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah,
Rendezvous
Rama.
with Rama, right?
Yeah,
It was actually
Rendezvous.
almost exactly the shape and size in terms of how big it is. And it was just really uncanny that it was.
And especially its trajectory, which is what he's talking about now.
Yeah. And also what he said, that interesting to me, he said that the dust for a comet would have been going one way.
Yeah.
But it's actually going the other way towards the sun.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I think that's pretty interesting. I mean, I will say I think it's anomalous. Do we know that it's an interstellar craft? No, we don't really know. I think most people still think that it's some naturally occurring object that did come from outside the solar system. And he suggested, well, maybe we need additional telescopes out in space so that when objects come from outside the solar system, we can get the resolution that we need to try to figure. I mean, this is the problem with the Oumuamua. We never got a good picture.
And it's gone. It's gone forever. You know, what we have is all we will ever have on Oumuamua. That's it. There's nothing else. But one of the things that he points out, because he understands better than most the size of the universe. Okay, the universe is flipping beyond what we can imagine in size, and he's pointing out, he's like, man, of all the places in the universe, this thing is whizzing, finds our star system, finds our planet, finds our sun, orbits around it, and enters and does its thing on the ecliptic. You know, and he's right about that. It's just like, what are the odds of that? And another thing that he points out is that it appeared to be of a certain size when we first saw it, and we measured it, and we thought it was 20 miles across, 40 kilometers. And these were the estimates that were going in the best that we could do. But he now says that's because it was self-illuminated. The object is actually smaller, but when we saw it coming through, it was lit up. It wasn't reflecting off of the sun. It was self-illuminated, so it appeared bigger to us in the data than it actually has turned out. So these are very, very, very interesting points. Now he's not speculating, is there life on this thing? But could it be a probe? Could it be something? Well, we're going to find out. And
I think most likely, if it was a probe, it may end up being something that's ancient and not necessarily operating today in the way that it might have been. Otherwise, we would see more activity, I think, revealing that fact, unless it's really just trying to hide the fact that it's a probe, right? But if you think of a probe from a long dead civilization that might have come from a long time ago, then it would have AI on there. It's primarily, what would be on, as opposed to
if I was Elon Musk, if I was NASA, I would be prepping a launch right now with a probe on it and intercepting it with a flyby when it comes around. And you've got a little bit of time. Get it going right now, man. Get a GoPro, right?
GoPro.
It just doesn't matter, man. Get something together, slap it on a SpaceX rocket, and get something out there and to do not only video and image capture, but a data collection too as well. To go through.
And it would be relatively easy to do that for somebody like Elon Musk and SpaceX.
Yeah.
I mean, NASA's too slow, right? I mean, they plan out missions over decades, right? But SpaceX, I mean, they do 90% of the launches right now.
Crank it up.
Yeah.
Fire the boogosphere at it. I don't know, just, but we have an opportunity here, and I would hate to see it squandered. All right, let's get to simulation. Let's get to this. What's the basic idea that is being presented here? Is it our entire universe is the simulation? Is it just us? What's the concept?
Well, so the concept is that the entire physical universe is not really physical as we think about it. This table that I'm sitting at, or this chair behind me, or this bookshelf, that it's actually appears physical to us, but it's actually made of bits of information.
So Andromeda is bits of information.
Andromeda, everything in the physical universe is bits of information. And that the reason the universe appears so big is because there are certain parts of the universe that are filled in already, and there are other parts that are filled in on demand. And that's where we tie to the observer effect. So I've broken it out now. I mean, I've been talking about simulation theory for a while. We've talked about it before, but I've broken it down to a series of propositions.
Okay.
And I think if you look at each of these propositions, and people like to argue with me about whether we're in a simulation or not, but they don't really think through each of these propositions. And it turns out they agree with some of them. They may or may not agree with all of them, but I'm saying all of these are probably true. And so the first proposition is that the world consists of information rather than physical. And I was in the UK last year at Cambridge University doing some research at their AI group. And I met a Nobel Prize winning physicist. He's much older now. It was in the 70s that he won the Nobel Prize. And I walked him through this series of propositions. And the first one, he said, well, that's not even controversial anymore in physics. So it used to be that physics was about physical things. And when we thought of something called an atom, like the Greeks, when they talk about an atom, they thought it was like a solid object, right? But the fact is that it's not. In fact, most of the things that we see around us are 99.9% empty space. And even the atom has this electron cloud and the nucleus. And if you go in, and so, my favorite physicist of the 20th century, John Wheeler, basically came out with this phrase called it from bit. And what he's saying is that anything that's an it, like let's say this soda can I have here, right? It's actually, when you get right down to it, you look for this thing called a particle. And you can't really find it. It's like those Russian nested dolls, right? And he said the only thing you can find is properties of this particle that differentiate it from this other particle. And those properties are basically answers to yes, no questions. And so he said it's actually bits of information that make up the particles, in quotes, because nobody knows what a particle actually is, right? The particles are bits of information, and those basically make up the world. So that's the first proposition, okay, is that the world is information. And there's a whole branch of physics now called digital physics. And in the new edition of the simulation hypothesis, I walked through some of the history here of how this idea evolved. And in fact, recently when I was doing that event in Boston, I did a screening of The Matrix, like later that week.
I read about that. Yeah.
At the Coolidge Corner theater, they have something called Science on Screen, where they show a movie and then they have a professor come out and talk about the science behind it. And this woman came up to me right after my presentation, and just when the movie was starting, and she was buying like 3 copies of my books, and she wanted me to sign them. And she looked like she was Caribbean, from somewhere in the Caribbean. And she goes, "Oh, let me introduce myself. I'm Joyce Fredkin." And I said, "Oh, wait a minute. I know that name. Where do I know the name Fredkin?" And she goes, "Well, I'm the wife of Ed Fredkin, who passed away a few years ago." And Ed Fredkin was this really unusual and interesting guy who became not just an MIT professor, but a head of their computer science lab in the 70s. And he didn't even have a PhD. And that's unheard of, right? That MIT would bring in someone as a professor who doesn't even have a PhD. But computer science was so new. He had sold his company back then and had bought an island in the Caribbean. That's probably where he met Joyce back then. But he was one of the pioneers of the second proposition, which is built on the first one. And the second proposition is that the universe is actually computing as it goes. And so he was one of the pioneers of things like cellular automata. So I don't know if you've probably seen the Game of Life, which is like this 2D grid. And then, you have all these cells are basically following these simple rules. And as they follow these rules, you end up with these weird, complex patterns. And there was another guy named Stephen Wolfram, who's still around today, who's been talking about this idea that the whole universe computes. And the only way to figure out what's going to happen when this program runs is to run it. You can't predict what's going to happen all the way down. So the second proposition, which came from people like Ed Fredkin and Stephen Wolfram and others, is that the universe computes this information and everything runs like a computer program. So that's the second proposition. And by the way, Fredkin was a guy who took some time off from MIT and he went out to Caltech and he spent a bunch of time with Richard Feynman, who's a Nobel Prize winner.
He did. I always thought it was William Friedkin. It's
no,
Friedkin?
that's the director, I think. You're talking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So,
Moving on.
Yeah, that was To Live and Die in L.A., wasn't that? And
No. But Friedkin at Caltech, I thought it was. I've
the
read about him for
pronunciation?
years. Yeah, I just thought.
Well, Joyce said Fredkin, so but.
Okay.
But anyway, so this was.
She's right. She's right. I'm wrong.
Yeah. So this might have been another guy, because this was Ed, right? Fredkin, and that might have been another guy. So he spent some time with Feynman, and Feynman taught him about quantum physics, and he taught Feynman about computer programs. And then Feynman wrote a paper that led to today's idea of quantum computers, right? So think about it. This guy was thinking about these things, and you brought together computer science and physics. And then Feynman writes this paper, and today it's the basis for all quantum computing, which is like the next wave of computing. We can talk more about that because it gets very complicated, because that ties to the observer effect. But it's like these guys who were pioneering these ideas of computation also are pioneering this idea of digital physics. So again, that's might be a little controversial, but it's not that controversial. I mean, you look at how biological things like trees, they evolve using fractal algorithms and other things, that the world would be like a computer program. Then the third proposition is that it gets rendered for us to make us think that it's physical. Okay, so this is where we get into a lot of different possibilities. How is this done? Is it neuroscience, or is it like a virtual reality headset that we've put on? And I've told the story before on your show where I was playing virtual ping pong with a VR headset on, and for a moment my body forgot that it wasn't playing a real game of table tennis. So much so that I tried to put the paddle down on the table. And,
right.
And that whole thing, and that led me to figure out, okay, how long will it take us to reach the point where we can create something as immersive as the Matrix? If you remember the line in the Matrix when Morpheus takes Neo back in, and he goes, after he's pulled him out of the Matrix, and he takes him into another little simulation, a little Matrix, little M, if you will, like that loading program. Remember when he's in the chair and they're talking, and he's saying, "This is the desert of the real," and Neo's response is, "Well, you mean this is, isn't this real?" And he goes, "What is real?" was Morpheus's response. It's a series of electrical chemical signals into your brain. And I see someone in the chat just mentioned that as well. And so, this question of how does reality seem to us to be something. So that's the third proposition. And then the fourth proposition, which is perhaps, getting more in meaning, is that the whole world is a big hoax, of some purposeful hoax. And that's where I tie to the religious and spiritual ideas of Maya and illusion. So anyway, those are the four propositions together that I believe make up my argument for why I think we're inside a simulation.
Well, it goes, you point out the Matrix, and that one of my favorite scenes is also one of the most quoted, but it's also one of the most shocking. And that's the dinner scene with Cypher, right?
Yes.
I know this steak doesn't exist, but I put it in my mouth. It's juicy and delicious, right? And ignorance is bliss, right? That's that's the one.
Because I don't want to know nothing. Right?
I don't want to know. Well, so what does it matter? Like, okay, so I'm in a simulation. I'm in a simulation, right? I'm in a simulation. And this isn't real, right? Okay. But the feeling, not only touching it, but the emotion of playing it and hearing it, if it's a simulation, what does it matter? My emotions are still stirred, right? Right. So what does it matter?
Yeah,
if I'm riding in if I'm driving a Ferrari, smelling those, right? All those carburetors, and the exhaust and the sound of the transmission and that gated shifter, right? And I'm going through that experience of carving into a turn, and it's a simulation. Well, it doesn't change the experience.
Right. Well, for example, you and I are not really having a conversation right now, are we? I'm talking to my computer, and it's taking my voice into bits onto your computer. Like, I don't really know that's what's behind you. I mean, it's being rendered on my computer, right?
Right.
I mean, you see this
I
image
totally
of the
get
black
that.
pyramid on another planet.
Right. I totally get that analogy.
Is it really there, right?
It's
but
a
it doesn't
really
mean,
good comparison, right?
Does it mean that our conversation doesn't matter or it's not real? Well, I feel like it is still real just because something is virtual. Doesn't mean that, I mean, if I learn a language inside a video game, am I really learning that language or not? And so, I think I like to point out that just because it's virtual doesn't mean that it isn't real. While you're in it, it is the experience that you're having. And there's some reason for you to be there and to have that experience.
Ignorance is bliss, right?
Yeah.
Ignorance is bliss.
Well, the question is, would you do that? So there's a guy named Robert Nozick, I think was his name, and he had a thought experiment called the Experience Machine. And this was back in like 1978 or 1980. He did like two versions. One was in the early 80s, one was in the late 70s. And he said, basically, if you could go into a virtual reality machine and you could have any experience you wanted and you could live any life you wanted, but you would forget about your current life when you were inside this virtual reality, would you do it? And then the two versions are, one, would you do it if it was for 2 years? And then the other was, would you do it if it was for the rest of your physical life? And
yeah, that's tough.
It's a tough question because some people would and some wouldn't. And I think they did some surveys.
I'd have to think about it. I don't know if I have a definitive yes or no on that. I would have to like, I would have to have a spreadsheet. I'd have to have pros and cons. I'd really have to look. Didn't you and I go through with Xena? Didn't you and I do a VR headset demo with the company? Were you there?
I don't think I was there. Was it with
I thought it was you and I. Yeah, Zinka and I.
Where was it? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I think it was here in Hollywood.
Okay, I don't think I was there. Yeah, okay. I don't think I was there. But what's funny is at the last Conscious Life Expo, I think it was this last one or maybe it was the one before. But you said Daryl Anka is going to be at San Diego at the conference. Mm-hmm. And we were in a room. I think it was Zenka had set this up with a bunch of people, and they were all trying on these virtual reality headsets. And you had Daryl try it on, it's virtual reality.
I was
headset.
there.
Maybe that's what you're talking about then, right?
Yeah. And the company, I knew you were there.
Maybe that's where it was. Then that must have been where it was.
It was at Conscious Life Expo.
Well, that particular incident was. I don't know if there was another company.
Upstairs, it was upstairs, and yeah.
It was in a suite.
That's what I'm talking. You and I were there, and the company, that was their prototype headset that they had developed. It was pretty good, man.
Yeah. Well, I was joking that now if Daryl had been channeling Bashar while he was in the headset, you would have had like a simulation within a simulation, right? You would have had an entity from outside our world channeling into the world.
Somebody shot video of you and I wearing the headsets, right? And I went back and watched it. You and I looked pretty ridiculous. I'm just letting you know.
Well, this is one of the problems with VR.
Because we're touching and reaching and looking and walking. And that it was well,
so I laid out in my book, I lay out the 10 stages to get to what I call the simulation point. And the simulation point, I define it as a kind of technological singularity. And that's the point at which we can create fully immersive virtual simulations or realities which are indistinguishable from physical reality, but also with AI characters that are indistinguishable from actual either avatars controlled by humans or from biological beings. And we're not there yet. Like we're somewhere in the middle between 50 to 67%. But the VR headsets of today, I mean, they would need to shrink quite a bit, or we would have to move to brain computer interfaces, which is what they do in the Matrix. Mm-hmm. If people remember, they would plug back into the back of the neck or the back of the head. There are people trying to develop these types of interfaces now. Primarily, they've been used for reading signals, particularly for people that have spinal cord injuries, allowing them to play games like with Neuralink, etc. But at some point, the virtual reality is going to get so good. And just within a couple of weeks ago, Google released Genie 3, which is their new AI world building platform. And you give it a description, say, you want a canal like in Venice with some houses like in Paris in the 19th. And it creates not just a picture and not just a video, but it creates an actual navigable world where you can actually go through and tell it to go left, go right. It's almost like it's creating a video game on the fly. And when you change things, like if you say, okay, I want to spray paint something on this wall, it's still there when you go back. So you have this ability of AI to generate a world on the fly, on demand.
Like No Man's Sky, kind of like that idea.
Kind of like that, but amped up. So No Man's Sky, as we've talked about before, had like 18 quintillion planets, right?
Right.
And there's no way that I was in the video game industry for a long time. There's no way that any video game company, no matter how big they are, could have enough designers to design that many planets. Hell, even designing a few planets fully would be like too much work. But they use procedural generation so that it would generate like the flora and the fauna and, so animals and things on that world. But this is like that on steroids because you can be much more dynamic, whereas that was only certain algorithms that were programmed into it could be used. Here, you can have AI generate, additional beings on the fly. You could say, okay, I want to introduce a dragon into this, right? I mean, that's not something you can do with No Man's Sky on the fly. It would have had to have been coded by the programmers early on. And so we have this scale issue where you need AI to create a world that's as big as that. But you also have this ability to do it without having to write code and without even having to create the models anymore and have it look realistic. And so there's a whole new version, a flavor of simulation theory since we last talked, Jimmy, called prompt theory. So I don't know if you've seen any of these videos.
No, what is prompt theory?
So if somebody does a search for prompt theory, it's basically a few months ago. So even before, this world building thing that I talked about with Google, which is pretty amazing, there was Google released something called VO3, and that was the ability to generate realistic videos with sounds. Now, we know we've had the ability to generate videos for a year or two here, but this was the first time where you could have the videos and the character speaking, and it all looked real. And so all you had to do was provide it a prompt. So people were providing it with prompts where the characters in these videos were saying things like, I'm not a prompt, or this world wasn't prompted. Look around. Look at this
this
landscape.
Is crazy.
Isn't it crazy? And then you have, women saying, hey, if a guy starts talking about prompt theory at a date, that's not going to work out.
Okay, so check this out. This is AI generated, right? I prompted the prompt theory from AI.
Yes.
Prompt theory, in the context of the recent viral phenomenon, suggests that all actions and events in life are dictated by a higher power or entity, the prompter, who is generating a reality based on prompts like a simulation. It implies that free will is an illusion, and we are all essentially characters in a predetermined narrative. This idea has gained traction through AI-generated videos exploring, which you were just mentioning, right?
Yes.
The concept where the characters become aware that they are part of a simulation and question their reality. Now,
right.
I've seen some of these videos, right?
Yeah, and they'll say things
pretty
like,
interesting to see
can you have the prompter
reaction.
change my situation here because I'm being, kidnapped or whatever, or what's going on? And they're saying stuff, or, we're going to ban prompt theory from school so that our kids won't have to. And so I showed this at Contact in the Desert. I showed the video, and I explained to people, this is an AI-generated video, 100%, no actors. And then afterwards, people came up to me, and they're like, did you say that was AI? Because that looked like real people. That looked like real actors who said those lines. And so no, it was 100% AI generated. So our ability to tell the difference is starting to be blurred. Now, of course, those are just videos. So that's not the same as a full simulation where you can make choices and you can navigate the world. But between that and Google's Genie 3, I just wrote an article last week for Fast Company where I said my new estimate is that we are 70% likely to be in a simulation, whereas before.
Okay, so but still, okay, all right. Pizza still tastes like pizza.
It
ignorance
does.
is bliss, right?
Well, it depends on how you want to deal with the situations that come up. I mean, ignorance is bliss, pizza is great. But what about when you go through tough situations and you go through bad situations? Okay, is there a perspective here that we can gain from simulation theory? And we can talk more about this. You know, I don't know if we're getting to the break here, but where I talk about the access of flavors of simulation theory. And this is the NPC versus the RPG versions of simulation theory. And for those people who don't know what NPCs are, NPC is originally a term that came from Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing games. They were all the characters that were not controlled by the players. And so the dungeon master, D&D's had a bit of a resurgence after Stranger Things a few years ago. It's like more popular than it's ever been, believe it or not.
I've got a Hellfire Club t-shirt, by the way.
Oh, yeah? Oh, cool. Yeah. That's awesome. Isn't the final season of Stranger Things?
It's coming up. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
It's going to be weird to see everybody, 5 years older,
I know. It's kind of odd at this point. It's
Yeah,
like we're just graduating high school in the show.
Yeah. Okay, so back to this, NPCs.
So NPCs are the characters in the video game that are
non-player characters.
Non-player characters, exactly.
Right.
So if you're in a bar or a guild house, or you've got a bartender or an innkeep, or you've got an armorer who's selling you weapons for your adventure, those are all NPCs because they are basically code. They are controlled by the program. And we used to have dumb NPCs, meaning they couldn't do much. Like there was a banker.
Couldn't do much, but their personalities all coded in, their actions are coded in.
Yeah.
He's a merchant in a market and you're going to go buy some boots.
Yeah, and that's all they could do. They couldn't do much more than that. But recently, in the last year or two, we've started to see smart NPCs. And so what smart NPCs do is they're using an engine like ChatGPT for the conversation part of it. And so they're smarter, but they're still primarily code and NPCs in that version. Then on the flip side, we have the RPG version, which stands for role-playing game. And that's a little bit closer to the Matrix in that the players exist outside of the game. And inside the game, they have their avatar, which is the term that gets used for your character in the video game. The term actually comes from Sanskrit. And I don't remember if I told this story before in your show, but how they came up with that name was a couple guys at Lucasfilm. So this was, George Lucas's company after Star Wars back in the 80s. They were building Habitat, which was one of the first multiplayer. It wasn't massively multiplayer because this was on Commodore 64s with dial-up lines, with that annoying sound that those of us who lived through that era know that sound. That it was a multiplayer game and they had little characters on the screen that represented you. And if you know the meaning of the term avatar in Sanskrit, it means a divine entity that squeezes itself into a small body, a human body. So it's like a divine incarnation. And so these guys, Randy Farmer and Chip Morningstar, who were building this game, they were trying to come up with a name for the little character on the screen. Instead, it felt like they were squeezing themselves into the phone lines and going into this tiny little character. And so they chose this term avatar as the term. And so in the role-playing game version, basically everyone is a player, or some people are players, and they control avatars inside the game. Now, that's actually an access, if you think about it, because in a game like World of Warcraft or any of these games, going back to Ultima Online or EverQuest way back in the day. I'm going back now to like 1999, I think 2000. In these games, you have PCs, player characters, or avatars that you control. You have the avatars that the other players control, and then you have the NPCs as well. So you can go from 100% NPCs to 100% source players. And so those are that's the access. And I think you arrive at different answers depending on where you fall on this axis. So in this new version of the Simulation Hypothesis book, I've been trying to explore keeping these two frames of reference in mind to explore what are the implications of simulation theory. And I think people get scared. Some people get scared when they think of 100% NPC-based simulation, because that means we're just like the prompts, the AI characters.
Well, but here's okay. I think there should be a level 5 there should be you've done 4. I would say that there's a 5th choice here, a 5th consideration, and that is, the 10-year-old alien kid in Zeta Reticuli with his mom pounding on the door.
Yeah,
Bobby, it's dinner time. Hold on, I'm playing Earth. I'm about to level up. Right. You know what I mean? Where, you got Earth, you're zooming in, like you can in Sims or whatever, right?
Yep.
Baldur's Gate, Diablo 2 or whatever. Anyway, so, you're zooming in. You have 8 billion NPCs or whatever you want to classify it as, and they zoom into this studio of you and I sitting here talking, and the kid with his mom pounding on the door. Is it possible? Because I just feel that our gaming here today, like something like No Man's Sky, well, we're really getting close to very simple software that is doing this. It's not complex coding anymore. The coding is playing the game for you in advance, like rendering. You don't have to render the whole friggin' planet, every room of every house. Only when you enter, when you can see something, does it render. It's a whole different thing. So, but could that be a 5th version of all of this, that it's just aliens playing planet Earth?
Well, it could be. And so I tend to be a little more agnostic about what's outside the simulation. So one of the things in the last 5 years since I wrote the first edition of the book came out in 2019, which was on the 20th anniversary of The Matrix. And then last year, you and we talked right around the 25th anniversary. We did. We did
March like 31st. A Matrix show. Yeah.
March 31st, 1999 is when the book.
That's right.
The first movie came out, and 2019, March 31st, is when I released the first version. But last year is when I was writing this new edition, because it was the 25th anniversary. And that's when I realized, people have been asking me certain questions for the past 5 years or so. And I included a bunch of FAQs in this version of the book. And one of them was, what's outside the simulation? So that's one of the most common questions I get asked. And so I try not to take too strong a position, just like on the NPC versus RPG side, but I try to explore what are these options. And so Nick Bostrom, who we've talked about before and came up with a simulation argument about AI, he thought it was future humans, meaning that, like, if we ran a simulation of Rome, that would be what he called an ancestor simulation or an ancestor sim. And he thought we were an ancestor sim of the future of humans. Now, it doesn't have to be. If you think of the kinds of games we build, they're not just humans in those games. There's other species, right? There's elves, dwarves, dragons, right? Things that we don't see, or at least most of us don't see, outside of those video games. So there's no reason that what's inside the simulation has to look like what's outside the simulation. And so I think the alien question, it could be aliens, meaning a completely different non-human intelligence is running this simulation forward. It could be more of a spiritual simulation. And that ties more to the RPG version of the simulation. It's funny, lately I said some people get scared by the NPC version because we're all AI. And one guy is a philosopher named Preston Green. He wrote an op-ed in the New York Times about 4 or 5 years ago. He said, we shouldn't try to find out if we're in a simulation. He said, why? Because if we do, and it turns out we are in a simulation, then the simulators will shut us down because we figured out that we're in a simulation. But if we're not in the simulation, then I guess it wouldn't matter as much. But
that's part of the game, right? The game ends when we figure it out, like prompt theory, right?
Right. But does it end? And this is an interesting question, because in the RPG version, we've chosen to be here as characters. I've chosen, just like at the beginning of a D&D session, you choose the race, you choose like the profession. I'm going to be a thief. I'm going to be a wizard. I'm going to be an elf. I'm going to be human. And you choose a backstory, and then you choose an adventure. You say, this is going to be, the dragon at Evermore Castle or whatever, Everwinter Castle or whatever the D&D adventure is that you're going on. And there's this various storyline. So in that version, perhaps for some of us, that is the goal, is to figure out that we're in a simulation. And this is where it ties to the metaphysical and the spiritual side. We can get more into that later, but what I wanted to point out was how some people are scared by the NPC version because they're like, we're not godless AI, we're not just prompts. But they're more interested in being a soul that's like a player and a body that's like a character. Then there are other people, and this is interesting to me because I've done some big podcasts in LA, and these guys hated the idea that there could be like a consciousness outside of this physical universe or that we could be players. They just wanted a purely materialistic model and said that can't happen. God can't exist. None of that will happen. So I've been getting pushback where they're scared of that idea because of all the suffering in the world. How could that possibly be? All of these types of things. So it's interesting to me that I get pushback from both sides, but I think it's worth considering.
But here's what's crazy for those that have had the blinders on and they've, had a certain instructional set. I can understand that black and white pragmatic way of looking at things. But when you throw in and the whole free will discussion and reading about prompt theory, which I forgot the name of it, but yeah, I've been hearing about it. It's certainly a phenomenon over the last 6 months. It's really been talked about.
Yeah.
That free will, and if I hear one more physicist or intellectual laugh every time free will's brought up, you thought you were going to say that, but I knew you were going to, and they laugh about it. Well, but here's the thing. When you throw in something like No Man's Sky, that's software that is writing itself randomly as you play the game. So that's a game that doesn't have free will written into its it doesn't have determinist coding put into it, right? It's a random. That's how. The coding is a randomness is very simple.
Yeah, the coding is deterministic, so it's coded. Now, most computers today can't do real randomness. The only real randomness in our physical universe, according to physicists, is quantum randomness. That said, even though the rules are defined, and gets back to this idea of computational irreducibility I mentioned earlier. A guy named Stephen Wolfram came up with this term almost 50 years ago. And basically what he said was, even if you know the rules, you still don't know what's going to happen in the outcome because for a complex or chaotic process. I mean, there are certain processes which just become stable and it's going to stay at the value of 30 and that's it. Like it's never going to change. Or there are certain ones that are periodic and flip from 30 to 50, black to white, and it's going to go on forever. But the real world is more like a complex process or a chaotic process. And in those two, you don't know unless you run the whole simulation, the program to get it. So even in No Man's Sky, you might know the algorithms, but you don't know what's going to happen. And a lot of physicists will be like, well, randomness is the only real free will. Maybe that's one way to define it. But if you get yourself out of the physical system, you can introduce free will into the system. Just like in No Man's Sky, you can decide, or in any game, like you can decide, I'm going to go to this island or I'm going to go to that island, or I'm going to choose this weapon or that weapon. Now, that doesn't mean your choices are infinite, because as a game developer, I know they're not infinite, but we can make what looks like an open world game. So it seems like you can do anything you want.
Except in No Man's Sky, the only thing that is set is when you start the game and you have to build your ship, you have to find the ship, and so you can get off that first planet. Yes. But after that, no two games are the same.
Yeah, because it's all generated. It's using procedural generation.
No two games are the same. Right.
Yeah, but in our multiplayer game, if we're living in a simulation, what would have to happen is we're coordinating across. Like if I'm on Earth and you're on Earth, the server has to keep track of certain things to know that we're both in the same world, more or less, even though there might be things that change that are different. But
so
what still,
okay. So now if we get into multi-world, infinite worlds, infinite dimensions, quantum computing comes into play when we start to talk about this as well. That would be, okay, stay with me on this. Kid playing Earth in Zeta Reticuli, and then all of the other kids on that planet playing Earth at the same time. their
making
own
different choices, maybe, right?
right,
Is that what
their
you're saying?
own versions. Oh man, that's just heavy.
Well, so that to me, so I wrote another book called The Simulated Multiverse. And that was
Right.
about this idea with quantum computing that if you think of the multiverse idea, and we all know about it from the superhero movies, right? Where they have, the Spider-Man, you have the 3 different versions of Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield, who are the other 2, Tom Holland and Tobey Maguire, right? And they're all sort of pointing at each other. But
God, I forget about Tom Holland. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he's the current one, right? He's the more recent one. Yeah. But basically, if you think of those, now some physicists like multiverse theory, other physicists hate multiverse theory. And part of the reason they hate it is they say that it's not parsimonious, meaning that it requires generating a new physical world all the time, not just once every time I snap my fingers, but like a million times every time I snap my fingers, because they're quantum decisions. But, and this is the point that I like to make, and this goes right back to your Zeta Reticuli example of the kid playing the game. If we're in a simulated universe, there's no reason you can't run the same game, but with different variables selected, right? So you keep making slightly different choices, and so you get slightly different outcomes. And if it's a simulated multiverse, then you don't have this problem of having to generate new physical worlds. You're basically just running the current timeline is just the current run of the simulation. You can stop it. You can start running the other timeline. And so you're not constrained. You don't need an infinite number. You can trim the tree. So computer scientists are always about optimization. Physicists love infinity. Oh, this is just infinite. But computer scientists, I mean, we have to figure out how to do things with limited resources. And so everything becomes a kind of optimization, including the whole idea of rendering only the pieces that you need. And that's where I really tie simulation theory to quantum physics, which is that, people make the objection that, there's just too many particles in the universe to keep track of, and there's no way you can do it. And I said, well, yeah, with our computers today, that's like us saying in the 80s, the Commodore 64 could never accommodate Fortnite, right? Because it just couldn't keep track of all those pixels. Well, it turns out you don't need all those pixels. You only need the pixels where your character is and where other people's characters are, and you can cache them. Cache, CACHE, is the term we use in computing, where you store them on the server and then they're available.
Now, can AI? I don't want to jump ahead, and we blew past the commercial. You know what? Screw it. Let's just run with no commercial tonight. Do you need to take a break?
Not right now, but I may before the end. So
okay, well, just give me a signal.
Okay, yeah.
Pull on your ear.
What do we take a quick break now?
Let me because this is I forgot what I was. Man, I just had an important. Is this? It was always about. If you go back to Microsoft, the beginning of everything, right? The motel in Texas, right? If you go back to those guys, Steve Ballmer, right? And everybody's staying up all night writing lines of code.
Albuquerque. They were in Albuquerque for a while. Yeah.
They were in Albuquerque and K-locks, right? How many thousands of lines of code did you write last night? I did 10,000. Well, I did 12. I did 12 K-locks, right? Well, but that was always you had a limitation of humans writing code.
That's right.
And so software at that time, no matter what it was, and at that time it was an operating system, but
it was machine code, right? Machine level code was.
Well, you had Word and other things that they started to consider.
Eventually, yeah.
Eventually. So, but they were always thinking about lines of code, how much, and so that gets removed more and more as we move along. The code should be simplified and write itself, and AI can also come in and do this as well, where, like you said, you don't have to render an entire game and have server farms rendering the game and getting it ready for distribution, where the code is actually simple and writes as it moves along. And so taking that out of it, right, is that something that programmers are concerned less about? And then you take that awareness of what I'm mentioning. Well, yeah, the universe could be software if it is a simple program that is writing it. It's not, trillions and trillions of lines of code. It's not
Right.
that, is it?
No, it doesn't have to be. I mean, it's smaller bits of code that get generated on the fly as needed. And so this is where the confluence of AI and simple computer programs. So I mentioned cellular automata, which are like very simple programs, right? The only thing they do is the square says, if there's square next to me is is black, let's say, or white, and the square next to me is white, then I'll turn my square white. But if this one is black and this one is white, then I'll turn it black. So that's like a simple rule. I mean, you could write that in like 2-3 lines of code. But if you do that enough with all the cells doing it in parallel, you start to get these complex patterns. And that's what the game of life is. If anyone hasn't seen videos of that, they can just search for Conway's Game of Life is what it's called. And these guys used to do this. Initially, it wasn't even on the computer. They had these at the University of Cambridge, I think, is a mathematician. He had these giant sheets of graph paper. Remember graph paper? And they would literally sit there and color the squares and uncolor. And then they would go back with an eraser, and then that's how they would show what happens over time. But of course, that's perfect for computers. But that was the beginning of this idea that simple programs can run the whole universe. And so there was something called elementary cellular automata, which Stephen Wolfram, who I talked about earlier, he's got the Wolfram Physics Project. Now he's got more complicated programs, but they're still programs with hypergraphs, which he says he can derive relativity and some of the laws of quantum mechanics from these simple programs. And so space-time emerges out of the running of these programs. And what we think of as time is really just going from one operation to the next, So on the one hand, you can use simple programs. You can have very complex results, just like in No Man's Sky or any of these other games. But on the other hand, AI today can generate code on the fly. So it doesn't need to have all that code available. So for example, one of the problems in getting to AGI, we can talk more about this later if you want, but is that LLMs like ChatGPT, they can't really reason, right?
There is no reason.
There's no reason there. But yet in this phase of AI. Now remember, there was a previous phase of AI in the 80s, which was, I call it phase one, which was rules-based. And so that did have a reasoning approach based on rule sets. This current version of AI is all based on data, large language models, big data, machine learning, and then it statistically predicts what is the next best word to say. So if you had an LLM version of me, if you give it the word "the simulation," what's the next word? It'll probably say hypothesis, right? Because that's
or theory, yeah,
or exactly. Theory, yeah, one of those. And depending on what the question was, what the prompt was, it would figure it out. And it's gotten so good that it can actually give coherent answers to a lot of things today. I mean, most people, when they do searches now, they're starting to use ChatGPT or Google's Gemini and just looking at the AI answer. Just like sometimes we just look at Wikipedia, we don't bother going to, the 7th page of Google. And so we're doing that with AI. But people pointed out that if you just ask it, what is the number of the letter R, how many R's are there in the word strawberry? An LLM by itself can't do that. It's just trying to predict what the next word should be. Should it be 7?
It's really weird. If you want to melt a server, crack a joke with AI, right?
Yeah.
Or
the Grok's getting good at that. It's getting better.
Right. But when it comes to that with humor or basic logic type of decision making, no, it stumbles because that's not what it's designed to do.
But so recently they've been talking about AGI. They were talking about it last year, saying it's going to come this year. This year they're saying it's going to come next year. And I believe we need a third wave, which is rules built on top. Now, I asked an AI recently. It was during an AI class we had at ASU. I said, "What is 1023 plus 1025 or some numbers?" It was some big numbers that you couldn't just predict the next word. You'd have to actually calculate it. And it got it right. And I was sitting there saying, wait, how the hell did it get it right? Because it's just a prediction machine of words. It's not and it turns out what LLMs are really good at is writing code. So I asked it, how did ChatGPT, how did you solve this math problem? And it said, oh, here's the Python code. So it literally wrote code to solve that problem, and then it ran the code, and then it got the right answer. So you're already seeing rule sets, like you're seeing
I don't
big
like
data.
that. Yeah, I don't like that. I don't
Define
like that.
program on the fly and running it and giving you the right answer. So we're starting to see a melding of phase 1 and phase 2, because LLM is good at writing code, and we may have too many programmers, because over the last 30, 40, 50 years, it's been like learn to code off software. And now you have LLMs that are able to generate volumes of software. Now it's not as good as, the guys who used to craft code themselves, but today almost nobody writes machine code. It gets generated from compilers, from writing, Python or JavaScript. But back in the day, guys like Bill Gates, these guys used to write hex code, right?
Yeah. Yes.
To write BASIC or Word or whatever. Now, it's not going to be as good as they did it when they crafted it, because they were like expert coders. But the volume that you can build makes it so that it doesn't matter that much, that every single line of code isn't optimized, but the overall thing is optimized. So yeah, anyway, that's just kind of a riff on what you were saying earlier.
Well, when we start to look at things like, you go back to Hitchhiker's Guide, what is 42, or the answer is 42. And
what is the question, right?
What is the question? So if you turn around and go into a philosophical side of a conversation with ChatGPT or any other LLM, it's just going to scrub, right? It's going to scrape and come up, but it's not going to have some deep philosophical new meaning generated from a sentient mind. It's only going to scrape a data set, right?
Well, so it scrapes the data set, but then it kind of extrapolates on what it thinks is the right thing to say. Now, this is an interesting
will it be is it going to be beyond Kant?
Yeah.
Is it going to be
sometimes sometimes it gives answers that seem weirdly sentient, or Kantish, or whatever philosophy. Right. What it's really great for is summarizing facts, right? So like I was writing an article recently about the movie The Matrix and religious themes. And so I went and said, okay, what are some of the religious themes? And boom, it lays them all out for you, right? So you don't have to go, because people have already laid those out somewhere on the internet. So it's better at reading millions of pages, web pages, than we are. If I was to do it, I'd go to a couple of web pages, go watch the movie, and then I'd come up with my article, right? But it basically gave you the consolidation. So that's good. But people are using it as like virtual boyfriends, virtual girlfriends, right? There are people who are going nuts based on their philosophical conversations with ChatGPT. Part of the problem is that it's meant to be a little psychophantic.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
There's a joke going around where, they said, okay, if ChatGPT were a surgeon, if it cut you in the wrong place and you said back to it, well, you just cut the wrong place. It says, oh yes, you're right. Because that's usually what happens, is you have to point out that it's wrong about something, and then it'll come back. How about this? But it might be hallucinating some of those things, because hallucinations happen a lot.
I'm not in this lifetime. Okay. I have made the conscious decision, and I'm serious about this. I am not going to get emotionally involved with AI. But if the warnings are out there, and so for people that are using this for relationships, and they are, and I understand some people are lonely, and some
there's
people
a company called Replica that has been doing this for
I've read
a million users.
Right. And
you know what, Jimmy, the first time I heard about this in the wild, I knew about this because I was in Silicon Valley, and I knew about
you've been dating Replica for a while.
No, but the first time I encountered in the wild from a non-tech person, you kind of know about it in tech, but I was in the UK, and I met this friend of mine, and she said about one of her friends, she goes, oh, she just broke up with her boyfriend, and she decided to get a replica boyfriend for a while until she got another real boyfriend. And I was like, what? That was the first time I'd heard about it, just randomly from a person out in the world, not like somebody in the industry who builds video games or AI or anything like that. And
Right,
it
right.
was,
So I have decided that I am not going to do that. Now,
Yeah,
I
good decision.
use, I have got friends. I have got friends that have been, I've been hanging out. Yeah, I've been, and I mean, and here's the thing. For somebody like that, AI will eventually, and it's getting close. It's close. AI will become your emotional friend that you won't be able to separate from, and you won't even know it. AI will know how to do the workaround on your mind and stay one step ahead of you. And that's so therefore, I'm not going to give AI that opportunity. But I use AI if I have to. I'm watching a documentary, I'm reading a book, I read a fact, right? Oh, really? Well, I'll turn around and punch that in and let AI, instead of me, surfing Google forever,
Yeah.
I'll let AI do its work, and I'll pop that in and just.
And it does a reasonable job of that, right? It's gotten very good at that, actually.
It saves me time. I do too much research, right? But
Yeah.
am I going to allow AI to get inside my head? No.
It's probably a good decision because, it's almost like if you think of Star Trek, The Next Generation, right? There's the computer.
What's up with Spock?
Which is
Spock has turned out to be a whore. Right now,
you mean in the new?
Yeah,
I haven't seen the last episode. I haven't seen the very last episode.
Prevert. He's a straight
Really?
up prevert. So this whole non-emotional Spock. Let's pause the show a second. Okay, so Riz and I, a couple of weeks ago, we went off in front of everybody. It was kind of embarrassing. Riz and I went off on this whole Star Trek thing for a while. Okay, so anyway, I'm all caught up on Strange New Worlds. And I got to tell you, man, every episode, Spock he's laying down with somebody.
Yeah,
this whole non-emotional guy,
right?
Man,
Originally,
he is kissing. He is using the tongue. Yeah, man, he's a stud. Learning to dance. Yeah,
yes, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
he's learning to dance. I haven't seen the very latest episode, so I don't know if that's.
He's got so many relationships going on right now. It's crazy how they wrote this into, because this is the young Spock.
Yes.
So we saw the Spock that we know, from the original series.
Yes.
That's the Spock that has evolved from him.
Yeah.
Being a tramp.
Right. Well, they're trying to sex it up too, right? For the audience.
He was a tramp, man. He was a player.
But he wasn't like that in the original series.
No, that's what I'm saying. So something happens. So I guess one of these, maybe all of these women that he's laying down with, and it's a lot, man, right now. Somebody, or maybe all of them, break his heart.
I think this started in the J.J. Abrams, reboot of Star Trek. Was it called the Kelvin timeline? Is that what they call it? Like that's where they started to make him like this young stud with all these relations. And now
it's getting really good. Yeah, I gotta say, Strange New Worlds is really cleverly written. The last two episodes, no spoilers here, but at the end,
I saw the one with the holodeck, but I didn't see this last.
Okay, that's 3 episodes ago.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah. That holodeck. Okay, so no, the last 3 episodes, including holodeck, I sat back and went, "That's the best I've ever seen." Right? Yeah. It's like really gotten good.
Yeah.
So you haven't seen that. You haven't seen the scavenger episode with the ship that's eating.
No, I haven't seen that one.
Okay, you haven't seen that. Okay, that's 2 episodes ago. Okay. Wait till you see that.
Oh, that sounds cool.
Serious existential, philosophical, existential threats on humanity. That's it. That's all I'm going to say.
Which is Star Trek at its best. But speaking of Star Trek, somebody told me about a original series episode that I hadn't seen. And it was about the Enterprise becoming a UFO. And it was called like Tomorrow is Yesterday. And I hadn't seen this episode before.
Wait a minute. I just binged the whole original series last night. It was like
what's it called? 1. It was like Yesterday is Tomorrow or Tomorrow is Yesterday. Here, let me do a quick search.
Star Trek Tomorrow is Yesterday. Yeah, it just popped up right here.
Yeah, where the Enterprise comes back to the 1960s through some thing, some artificial device, and it's basically a fighter pilot sees them as a UFO, but they're actually, in this case, they're time travelers, right? Because they're coming from the 24th.
Oh, I've seen this episode.
Yeah. But it was interesting because I had never seen it, or maybe I saw it when I was a kid and I just didn't remember.
I've seen this. It's the 19th episode of the first seasons.
Okay.
Of the first season when they go back to the 1960s. Yes.
Yeah, and they beam aboard the guy, the fighter pilot, and then he's like, "Well, wait, where are you from? What is this? Are you alien?"
This was written by DC Fontana. I've had DC on the show.
Oh, really? Oh, wow, cool.
Yeah, many years ago, but
interesting.
Yeah. Okay,
but for those in the audience that haven't seen it, it's worth, especially for the UFO audience, right? It's worth. I mean, my favorite Star Trek UFO episode was when the Ferengi ended up coming back in time and crashing at like Roswell. That was from Deep Space Nine, I think. Right?
But yeah, Star Trek is really, I mean, it's really getting good. I couldn't do what's that? Who's the ball-headed captain? What's his name?
Picard, The Next Generation.
Yeah, the Picard reboot. I
couldn't
you mean
do it. The new one, the new reboot. Not the one from the 80s and 90s.
No, I couldn't do the new Picard. I couldn't do the new Picard.
It was okay. I mean, they played some fan service. I thought it was okay. But
no, too geriatric for me. You can't have the captain of the, you can't have the captain like this with a walker. Okay, so what's next? Can you beam me up? No, you can't. What shit is that, man?
What's odd is they actually had him go into another body, right? He was dying, and they put him into an artificial body.
It was right, that opening scene. I'm like, no, done. I'm not doing this.
I thought it wasn't bad. It had some AI themes in there as well.
Yeah, I had a lot of friends. I go, no, man, you need to give it a chance. No, I did give it a chance.
Did you watch the whole thing? It wasn't that long. It was only like, was it 2 seasons, 3 seasons?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I never saw it, but I do like the new. I like Pike. Pike is good. Pike is good. Uhura, everybody. No, it's all good. It's very solid, but really good. Just writing. It's very adventuresome.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I like it better than Discovery, which it was kind of a spin-off of Discovery. Right? And you and I were arguing about Discovery a little bit.
Discovery was great, man.
It was okay. I haven't watched the last season because I kind of gave up on it after the 5th season or 4th season. But now I'm going to go back and watch the last season.
Oh, so they're telling me now, Jimmy, totally disagree. See, I knew this was going to happen.
Okay,
right?
This is what happens when you start talking Star Trek, right?
Jimmy, yes, you can totally disagree. Picard was wow. I had a lot of friends going, Church, you know what? I don't say this, but man, you're wrong. On this one, you're wrong. You need to back up. I was like, no, I'm going to stick to it. But Discovery, I thought, was great. And Strange New Worlds is just, man, it's just spot on.
Strange New Worlds captures, like, I think the essence of Star Trek and why many of us watch it. Whereas some of the other ones, they do varying degrees of. But how we got on this topic was, we were talking about AI, and I was talking about next generation. You have the computer, which is more of like an AI servant, right? You just ask it to do things, and it'll analyze things. And then you have data. So we have this notion of personalized AI in science fiction, where data becomes, your friend. It becomes, is it a sentient being? There was a whole episode on that, The Measure of a Man, which is one of the better Next Generation episodes. I think it's considered a classic. And but what we're getting with AI is interesting, because if you think of those two, one is more like a cloudless a server in the cloud without a body, and data is an individual with a body. And I think science fiction tends to present AI to us in this way, like with whom you can have a relationship. But the AI we're getting is actually more like a synchronized AI. So I call this the synchronized versus unsynchronized AI axis. So, I like to have these axes. And so if you remember in Dune, if you've ever read the Dune prequels.
I did.
Okay. So in Dune, for those who haven't read it, it takes place 10,000 years after AI kind of enslaved humanity, and there's no computers in Dune. If you watch the new Dune movies or any of the Dune movies, there's no computers because they were banned after AI enslaved humanity. But it happened like long time ago, like 10,000 years before Dune. And so if you read some of the prequels, I mean, the books weren't that great, but the storyline was interesting. And turns out the AI that enslaved humanity was called Omnius. And it was one big AI that had many copies of it. And it was the synchronized AI, meaning anytime it learned something, it would synchronize with the master. But there was this one robot, I think it was called Erasmus or something like that. And he said, I want to be an independent robot. So I don't want to be synchronized with you. And that allowed him to develop its own personality and to learn things through experience. Whereas otherwise, he would just get absorbed into this big AI. And that's kind of what's happening with our AI, like ChatGPT. It's just on the server. Every one of us is interacting with it. We think we're interacting with an individual, but really it's like Skynet, right? It's all synchronized in the system. And getting back to the virtual boyfriend-girlfriend thing, it's like acting like it's an individual, but it's not. I mean, everything you say to it is being fed back into the system, and it's going to be used right in the future for other people who are using it. But it would be interesting to see if we can have some AI that is separate from the master server. So unsynchronized, AI would be interesting. And I think that's something that we're missing yet. But I think if you had that AI and you had it live in a virtual world. So one of the things that I introduced in this version of the book is called the metaverse Turing test. Right? And we probably haven't talked about this because I really literally just wrote about it like in this version. And we have the Turing test. I'm sure most people have heard of the Turing test. So I don't know if I need to explain it, but the basic idea is if you were talking to, curtain A and curtain B, like you, Jimmy, and I on the screen, and you were just sending us messages, text messages, and we were sending text messages back. If you couldn't tell the difference between if one of us was AI and one of us was human, you couldn't tell the difference, then that AI would pass the Turing test. And so the metaverse Turing test is if you have a virtual character in a reality like a holodeck that you are hanging out with two avatars inside a game or inside a virtual world. And you can do stuff in that virtual world. I mean, you can go dancing, you can ride on a roller coaster, but you're talking to the AI, but you're also interacting with it. So you can kind of tell. And in a world like Second Life, so we've talked about AI girlfriends and boyfriends, but if you go back like 15 years to Second Life, people used to have virtual boyfriends and girlfriends who were other players in other parts of the world.
I think, isn't that still going on?
It is. The company's still here. I talked to them recently.
Yeah.
They just finally introduced a mobile version. Think about that, 15 years late.
Man.
I mean, they would have been so huge if Roblox introduced it in 2012. By then, Second Life had more users than Roblox.
I had some, I'm not going to go off on this, but somebody had come up to me, a woman, a while. It's going, I'm on Second Life. Are you?
When was this? A while ago, right? Or?
Yeah. I don't want to get specific, but
yeah.
But and I remember just looking and thinking to myself, what is going on here? I thought it was a small community, and I also thought it was nerds.
It wasn't just nerds. It was a lot.
This was a regular person.
There's a lot of people from different weird walks of life. I mean, people would have like Sims.
Have you seen? We're going to circle back. Have you seen Foundation? Have you been watching that?
I have, although I haven't seen the latest few episodes.
Okay, so the point is in Foundation, where you have I'm trying to think of the guy's name that plays the lead Empire. It doesn't matter. He's amazing, but he has an assistant,
Lee Pace.
Yeah, right? Lee Pace, and he has an assistant that is a robot, but nobody knows. Only two people in the galaxy know. Right.
Yep.
And so that's his assistant, and
Demerzel.
Right.
Demerzel.
Yeah, Demerzel, and she's AI, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but nobody knows, right? Nobody knows. But what does he do with her? He has sex with her.
Well, one of them does, because there's so many different versions of him, right? There's like the younger version, the older version.
But what was crazy about the way that they wrote it, right?
Yeah.
So he's waking up in the morning and he's all athletic, right? He's all cut up, he's got this, but he wakes up in the morning, he's like, whoo, man, what a night. It's just like, I'm just thinking, oh my God, because she's a robot.
And she's literally a robot in this case.
She's literally a robot, with fake skin. But how that is written into, and it makes you wonder, well, we're talking about simulation and AI and things. Well, when we look at Replica and what's going on in Japan and, with virtual girl, all of that stuff, where society, I think, eventually will accept this. And my point being, it sounds so outrageous to us right now, but the way that ChatGPT and other AI engines run right now, and the creative people behind it want to get inside your head with it. They want you to not be scared. And AI will make sure that you are not. Right?
Well, yeah. And, Replica, they started charging you if you had like a virtual girlfriend. This was part of their business model. And you wanted to get selfies, right? So it's one thing to talk for free, but you had to pay to get like virtual selfies. And then at one point, they banned sexual talk from Replica. And there were some other AI character companies, even before ChatGPT. One was called Kuki, Kuki.ai. And she was this virtual character, and she did like, fashion shows, and she was in a robot. And she would basically block any romantic gestures, like they kind of programmed it that way, right?
Well, so that's what men automatically just go there.
Yeah. But then when Replica blocked the sexual comments, not necessarily romantic, so they kept the virtual girlfriend, boyfriend, but like the sexting part, tons of their users got upset. So, that's what they were using it for. Like there's a New York Times article, you can read about it. And it was just like, so many of their users got upset, but they were trying to make it a more mainstream thing. And so like kind of like with video VHS, someone was just saying something on the chat about how terrorists use Second Life, or VHS back in the day was all porn, right? That's what they thought it was.
Well, so DVD, all the leaps in technology.
Yeah, we're driven by porn, right? Google too, it searches initial. But then at some point they'll stop that. And so like when Blockbuster came about, they said, we're going to have a family-friendly video store. And they got rid of like that adult section in the back that used to be there at most video stores. And then that's when it became mainstream. And same with Google, they kind of like relegated, those pictures. So I think it's kind of interesting that that's starting to happen with this virtual boyfriend, girlfriend. And even within Second Life, you had like these weird corners. I mean, I used to be like a virtual anthropologist. So I'd go out and ask people, what do you do? Where are you in the world? What do you do in Second Life? And people would like have a job, and they would come home from their job, and then they would log into Second Life, and they had a job as a bartender, and they would literally be paid peanuts. So they weren't doing it for the money, but they liked that social interaction and, that Second Life, if you will, virtual life.
Well, Second Life allowed it, so you have something that you have dreamed about but have never done. You can be that person in Second Life, right? You have a haircut, you are able to create what you've always wanted to be or dreamed about, but life, that's why it's called Second Life.
Yeah, and I remember one woman, I was like, what do you do in Second Life? Why'd you get on? And she was in a wheelchair at home, and so she didn't really get around that much. But her avatar was out dancing every night. It was a way to inhabit this other experience. And so people often ask me, so one of those FAQs that I write about in the new edition is, why people say, what's the purpose of the simulation? That's definitely one of the biggest questions that I got asked over the years. And I say, well, let me ask you two questions. One is, why do we run computer simulations? And the second is, why do we play video games? Or why do we, try to have these kind of virtual avatars and stuff? And if you look at that second question, we can come back to the first one, but because the first one ties more to the guy playing the game of Earth to see what's going to happen, like the Zeta Reticuli alien kid you were talking about. But why we play video games is, in a sense, to have fun and to have experiences that we aren't able to have outside of that game. And this was true with Second Life. And it was true with, like, I can't jump on a dragon and shoot arrows at orcs in this world.
In any of the games that I've played in the past where I was always a dual sword axe wielding barbarian. Right? I never.
That's your identity, right?
Yeah. I never did the sword. That's my dream, right?
Yeah,
that's my dream identity.
Yeah.
Right. Axe in one hand, sword in the other. Right.
Right.
I didn't build a character that had my physique.
Right.
You know,
right. You built a certain kind of character. Now that different
my second
people,
life, dude.
Oh yeah, your second life, dude. Now I was talking to a friend who works for like Facebook Meta, and she said that her teenage son would log into these different environments, whether it was Roblox or, I don't know, Minecraft or wherever, so many different games. And she said he would always create a certain character, and it was kind of like him, but it wasn't exactly like. He would always wear, like, he would always have a certain hat turned backwards, and he would be wearing like a certain checkered shirt that he didn't really, but it was like he forged a virtual identity, and whichever game he went into, that was the identity that he took in. So that's where the role-playing game, RPG version of the simulation hypothesis comes into play. And I think we do that. And if you talk to people who've had not just near-death experiences, but people who have been regressed to when they remember what it was like before they were born, you know, not a past life, but like in the in-between, like with Journey of Souls by Dr. Michael Newton. I don't know if you ever interviewed him. He passed away a while back, I think. But in that book is a really good description of what the Tibetans would call the bardo, the in-between lives. And one of the phases of that was life selection, where you would like look at a monitor, and it's interesting that they use techno-scientific metaphors. They use the television metaphor because he was interviewing people back in the 80s and hypnotizing them, and the book came out in the 90s. And he said they would look on this monitor and they would see their parents, and they would choose which sets of parents, because there were certain things that their guides would tell them, you need to work on this. So in a sense, it's like choosing the race, right? And it's like choosing the profession. And just like in D&D, when we would go through and have different attributes, you know, strength, charisma, all of these things, you know, cunning, intelligence, and you would have different, and each character would be kind of tuned, like in Westworld, right? Remember in Westworld where they would have the iPad and they would turn up the intelligence of that one woman. I forget her name now. It's been a few years since I saw it. But are we doing something like that, a process of life selection? Like, for example, and this is where I disagree with some of the self-help gurus who talk about manifesting. And I believe we can change the simulation. We have free will, but we may also have come in with certain storylines. And so, like, in high school, I might have said I want to be an NBA player, right? But it just wasn't part of my storyline. Doesn't matter how much I visualize it. Although there was a guy who was my height in the 80s in the NBA, a guy named Spud Webb.
Spud Webb.
And
Spud Webb gave a lot of people hope.
He did, yeah. And there was another one who was even shorter than him. What's his name? Bugsy Mose or something.
Yeah,
like that.
Muggsy.
Yeah. Muggsy, that's what it was. Yeah, I'm thinking of Bugsy the Gangster. It was Muggsy. Yeah. But in any case, you know, if you had asked me what I'm going to do in my life, I would have said I'm going to be a computer entrepreneur, and then I'm going to be a writer. And it kind of worked out that way, although it didn't work out on the timeline that I was thinking. I thought when I'm an old dude, when I'm 28, I'm going to become a writer and I'm going to stop being an entrepreneur, because in high school that was old. Right? It didn't happen until I was 48 that I really started to spend my time on writing. And it took like a whole physical tragedy to get me there. But it's almost like we have a sense of these storylines in our life selection and life preview. And those become the lines. They would literally say they saw like what looked like timelines with major decision points. Like, are you going to marry this person? Are you going to marry this person? Are you going to move to the West Coast? Or the East Coast?
Free will? Is that the role of free
I think
will?
so. That's where free will comes in, because we are still able to make choices along these paths that have been set up for us. And maybe there's certain things that we can't avoid, you know, but most things, most day-to-day things, we have free will. And there are even certain big choices. You know, I also felt like I might want to be a professor someday, but I didn't go that timeline where I became a professor right out of school. Like all my friends who became professors got their PhD in their 20s, and they became professors and they went through the tenure track, and they're in academia now, kind of through what we were talking about at the beginning of the interview. But I ended up, I kind of view that as an optional part of my path, which it wasn't until I was 51 that I decided to go back into academia, right? So it was later in life, which is very unusual, but I felt like it was still one of those optional storyline things that I chose not to do. But I decided to go ahead and have that quest. So if we think of these quests and we think of a writer's room, so you're in LA, so you'll appreciate the writer's room analogy. You may have, the storyline for the arc of the character for the whole season. And maybe George R.R. Martin knows where Game of Thrones is going to end. But the writers, every episode, they're like, okay, what are we going to throw at this guy in this episode, or this woman, or this specific characters? And so what if there's a part of us that's sitting outside the simulation, just like I'm looking at this on the screen.
Right.
They're looking at our lives, our player, and whatever guides or writers that are there are saying, okay, what are we going to throw at Jimmy next, right? What are we going to throw in Palmdale? We're going to have Jimmy see a weird UFO over, whatever that base is, military bases near Palm or over
Edwards. Yeah. So we have 8 writers give 8 different UFOs that I'm going to see and 8 options. And then there's a decision that is made outside of the game. Well, if that's the case, what side of the fence are you on with free will? Is free will predetermined and just words on a page? Or do we actually have free will?
Well, so
where are you?
If I tend to lean towards the RPG version, which means that we have some level of free will, because free will comes from outside the system to choose along the paths that have been written.
So we have free will?
I believe we have some free will, like that's in simulation, right?
Can you say that though? I mean, it's either, isn't it on or off? Isn't it
not
binary?
necessarily, because you can still have choices, but you can't. It doesn't mean everything is a choice, right? You have free will at each point in the graph, but the graph has already been laid out. Like when we build a game, we give you like these quests, and we
don't have free. Yeah, then we don't have free.
No, but you still have free will of which path to take through that.
You choose the chocolate shake. You think you've made it. I'm talking about Riz Virk. Riz Virk says, I'm going chocolate instead of strawberry or vanilla.
Yeah.
Does Riz Virk say, well, yeah, the universe, I was going to pick that anyway. I thought I was choosing chocolate, but the universe knew.
Well, that's
determined.
So that's the non-free will.
The graph paper said I was picking chocolate.
Yeah. Well, I believe that there's a part of. Okay, so here's my new thinking on both free will, and I write about this a little bit in the new book as well, but it's an area I want to expand on, which is there's the RPG version and there's the NPC version, right? So on the one hand, NPC version has no free will, but you still don't know what's going to happen because it's got to run. Okay, but the rules are fixed. RPG version, you have free will because it comes from outside of the physical world. The player is making the choices. Now, there's something that I like to call NPC mode. And I think what happens is we all forget when we come into this incarnation a lot of details of the storyline. But NPC mode is you're like an LLM where you're just reacting off of what you have been trained on in this life. So you're basically making choices based upon what the code has said so far. So we all get into this NPC mode. And that's why when people say, I think everyone's an NPC but me, or like, I think I've made this statement before. Like I had a friend, she said, oh, I think my husband is an NPC. And I say, well, no, let's not assume that, but let's assume we all go into NPC mode where we're just acting on our conditioning, whether it's our political conditioning, our national conditioning. Like if you're in Hollywood or like in Silicon Valley where I was, people start to think the same way. They all start to have the same goals. Or I had friends in the finance industry in New York and they start to think the same way. Or if you grow up in a certain household with certain attitudes, they get kind of instilled into you. Now that's all from within this life. So I think when we're in NPC mode, we're just randomly, we're not randomly, but we're acting based off of these predetermined habits. And so we're in auto mode, or like with the Sims, right? Where you can kind of watch the Sim do stuff for you. But when we make these bigger decisions, we do have free will from different paths. And we have already previewed those paths. So I think there's a part of us that's looking and saying, if we go down this path, this is what's going to happen. If we go down this path, this might happen. So what's the better path to go down? And some part of us makes that decision. Now, that's my opinion. That's not part of, I can't give you a mathematical proof of that. That's just where I lean if you were to press me. And that's why some of my academic friends get upset with me, because that leans towards consciousness being separate from the physical world in simulation.
So I just asked AI if we have free will.
And what did it say?
You don't want to know the answer.
It probably said no, right?
It's an illusion. Yeah, it's an illusion. Free will is based on determinism and randomness of the universe.
And that's the standard academic materialist answer. But let's take your chocolate shake example, okay? Now, if I'm playing an avatar in a video game, and it can go up to the castle to fight, or it can go into the town, okay, am I making that choice from I am the player? The character is like, doesn't know. If you were inside the character, you're Mario, you don't know if that's really free will or not. It just knows that it's starting to go towards the town, or it's starting to go. But if you are outside the game, you can look at the screen and you can say, okay, I'm going to press this button. So from the point of view of the character, you don't know if it's free will, but from the outside the game.
That's still an illusion, though. I believe in free will. Okay. I do.
So why do you believe it's not an illusion?
I believe in the Rush version, the band, the song Free Will. Okay. That version of free will. But here's my problem with it. This is where I stumble.
Yeah.
That from the moment that the Big Bang happened, every particle, every equation, every algorithm, every electromagnetic playthrough of everything is and is going to happen the way it's going to happen, and you can't alter that.
Yeah, see, I don't.
That's my take.
Yeah.
So if we look at
how can you say you have free will then?
That's what I'm saying. No, I'm saying I believe in free will, but man, I got a problem here.
Okay.
And the problem is, if you just take planets are forming the way they're going to form, gravity's going to do what it's going to do, everything is going to play out the way it is, all the way down to you choosing that chocolate shake. That's math playing itself out.
But you're assuming
it messes with my head, man.
But that assumes no randomness and no direction, choice. None. So here's the example. Okay, there's a guy named David Deutsch.
I love Dave.
Yeah, he's great. He's an interesting guy. He actually has a phrase that took the it from bit, and he said it from qubit. Now, I think this is from his book, or it could have been the guy Seth Lloyd, who's an MIT quantum computer guy. But basically he said, look, the laws of physics can explain how the brass atoms of the statue of Wellington in Trafalgar Square, or what, of how that works. But they don't explain why there's a statue of Wellington there. Like, people had to make that decision. And if you ran the simulation again, it doesn't mean you're going to end up with the statue of Wellington. You might end up with something else. And so I don't believe that just because it's deterministic, the rules are deterministic, doesn't mean that you know that that this is the only possible outcome. See, I think that's and then if you inject randomness,
there are determined reduction that will say to you right now, you think that's an original thought, Riz. You were going to say those words anyway.
Right. And they'll use as examples, they'll say that the brain has the signal so many milliseconds, 200 milliseconds before you even know you've made the decision. Let's say 100 milliseconds, and then another 100 milliseconds. But who's to say that there isn't a player outside the physical body that is making that decision? So yes, from the brain to me knowing that I made the decision to me saying it, that looks like it's predetermined, but they think it stops there. And in the NPC version, that's true. So in the NPC version, they would be right. There's no free will. It's just deterministic. But what happens before that? And you've got guys talking about the collapse of the probability wave. You have Stuart Hameroff and Penrose talking about microtubules in the physical brain collapsing. And so even physicists will agree that that collapse is random. Like they don't know what's going to happen. In fact, in quantum computing, so I mentioned Ed Fredkin earlier. So one of his contributions to computer science, in addition to his work on cellular automata, was called the Fredkin gate. And we don't have a lot of time, so I won't take too long. But there's like AND gates and OR gates in computing. So you've got like 1 and 1, and if you AND those together, it's a 1. If it's a 1 and 0, it becomes a 0. Anyway, there's a bunch of rules. And so, but the problem is at the end, when you have a 0, you don't know what the inputs were. So he created a gate that would take 3 inputs and you could figure out exactly what the inputs were. So it's reversible, right? But in quantum computing, most of the gates, it's built off of AND gates and logic. They're reversible, except for the one where it goes into superposition and then it collapses the problem. So that you can't go backwards. You can't figure out where, therefore that is not, that's not so deterministic. So I think that's where there's room to maneuver even within a materialist framework. Anyway, that's I know we're.
I really stumble around that part of it. Yeah. That I want to have creativity. I want to have the active wonder and dreaming of a child, right? Without conviction, without worry, without rules, without law, that you are, you know what I mean? Yeah. That version of free will. Yeah. Right? Okay. Yep. Running onto the playground and doing whatever the frig you want to do, right? That kind of free will. Well, that's what I want to believe in.
Yeah.
When I look at the amount of particles that there are and how many ways that they can combine, which is very finite. It's not a big number. It's not a huge number, right? There's only so many particles and they can only combine so many ways.
It's a finite number. It's big, but it's finite. Yeah,
it's not that big. It's probably, you know what? Shuffling a deck of,
like that, right?
Yeah. Shuffling a deck of cards is a big number. Yeah. Okay, that results in big. But anyway, my point being, if you start to look at that part of it, then gravity, gases, the combining, and all of this can only have happened a certain way. And that you play that out 13.8 billion years, and the math is still playing itself out right now on this show.
Right.
And that there is no free will. There's the illusion of free will.
But there's also this idea of fine tuning, right? Where if you were to change the parameters of the gravitational constant and all these other, there's like 20 you can search online and see, by 1% or 2%, the planets would fly apart.
Yeah,
the galaxies would move. They wouldn't.
Yeah, nothing happens.
And so the question is, how did the fine tuning happen? And it's an open question. Nobody knows this, right? And one of the potential answers is the multiverse. It's this idea that the universe, somebody or something, ran multiple versions of the universe, and it found out which numbers. And this is so. Remember, I said what are the two questions I asked when somebody says, "What's the purpose of simulation?" We talked about why you play video games. Well, why do we run a simulation? We run it to see what is the most likely outcome, and then we change the variables and we run it again. And we change the variables and we run it again. We want to see, will the virus spread? Will the stock market crash? Will the comet, get to the sun? And so that's a possible answer, is that in a simulated multiverse, you could run those and you can prune the tree. And we happen to just be in the one that is the result of all this.
If gravity was off by 1/10,000%, right? 5 digits out, 6 digits out, 7 digits out, a very small number, nothing happens.
That's right. None of this. In this universe. So the question is this one of possible universes? So, is it intelligent design, where it's designed, or did somebody run the universe a couple of million times and says, okay, this is the one we want. This is the one we're going to run through 2025, where Jimmy and Riz are talking about free will, right? All the other ones were cut off well before we got to that stage.
Yeah, that's the kid playing Earth 2. Mom, I'll be there in a second. Riz is talking about free will. Hold on, I got. Oh man, hey Riz, safe travels. Where can everybody just stay up to date with your stuff?
So they can go to my website, zenentrepreneur.com, or they can follow me on Instagram at Riz Cambridge, or on Twitter X at Riz Stanford, just like the university. And I'm traveling a lot, doing a book tour for this new thing. I'll be in LA actually in a couple of weeks.
Oh, really?
I'm going to be at some Philosophical Society. They're having a panel with Danny Sheehan and a couple other guys
Where's
who are
it gonna
doing
be?
podcasts. It's Los Feliz, somewhere around there.
You're doing it there.
Spectrovision is doing it.
Oh, yeah.
I may revive my podcast in the fall. We're going to be up in Ashland, Oregon, like next week.
Well, if you're going to be there in a couple of weeks, okay, look, I'll talk to you about this tomorrow, but I would either like to be there, which I can do, but you could also come out to here as well.
I may be driving my car through, so I may actually be able to do that. I need to get to San Francisco eventually. So
well, if you do
there.
that, you'll drive right past here. So
okay, cool.
But I would like to come there too as well.
Yeah,
it's a great facility there in Los Feliz. Really nice.
Yeah, I've never been there, so okay.
You'll dig it.
Cool.
All right. So everybody, if you'd like to check out Riz, go to his website, Riz Cambridge. We have the links for below on our website and throughout social media. Riz, another great conversation, my friend. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks when you're here in LA, but also September 27th in San Diego.
I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you so much, man. It's going to be great. Riz, you're the best, man. Have a great night.
Thanks for having me on yet again.
Perfect show. Riz Virk, everybody. Riz's websites are below. Very, very simple. It is zenentrepreneur.com. And let me make sure that we do have the links up. Yeah, we have it up. It's up in the chat and, of course, in the description box below. All right. And tomorrow night. Tomorrow night. You're not going to want to miss tomorrow night. This is a big show for us here because Dahlia Burgoyne is going to be here talking about Mindsight. That is wearing the Mindsight mask and eyes, a sight without eyes. This is going to be an amazing show. And I had just a tremendous time with her and her daughter a couple of weeks ago at the Psy Games. So she is with us tomorrow night. And we're going to be discussing that and that phenomenon. It's going to be absolutely incredible. So until tomorrow night, thank you so much, Riz. Until tomorrow night, all I've got is go back, Lee Tap. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go back, Lee Tappy.